Hey guys. So I told y'all last night that we would be posting a teaching video kind of today, since we kind of had just a family meeting last night and didn't really get too much into the Bible. So I kind of want to finish up the thought we started last week with this knowing your status. Last week we talked about how it's so important for the believer to know, first off, that they can't lose their salvation and to know that they are saved. A lot of people ask that question. A lot of people are concerned about whether or not they truly have it. So knowing this truth, knowing that you're saved, is one of the most important things that a Christian can have so that they can enjoy their salvation, so that they can embrace what God has done for them. Another big part of this is that, the Bible tells us that in 1 Corinthians that that God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. So if we're struggling, if we're confused, that's not coming from God. That's coming from our enemy. So we want to be able to embrace peace. And we want to be able to embrace knowing exactly what our status is with God. And we see that in knowing that we're saved. And we also see that there can be a lot of confusion and there can be a lot of fear if we're not sure we're saved. And we really aren't. That's one of the biggest sources of confusion that we see in the world right now. I want to read a couple verses to you, and then I want to talk just for a few minutes about this. But in Matthew chapter 7 and verse 21, Matthew 7 and verse 21, it says, Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works. And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. I've shared with you guys before that these are some of the most scary verses in the entire Bible, because it's not about people that we automatically think of as sinners or as the lost. But these verses are about people inside of the church. These people that were crying out to Jesus, they had been in the church and they had worked in the church. And they had done things for God. But this is the greatest proof that we have, that salvation is not based on the things that we do. And I'm going to get to that here in a minute, because there should be activity. There should be things that we do. But you cannot earn your salvation. If I could earn my salvation, Jesus wasted his time coming to earth and dying for me, because I just needed to be better. But none of us can earn that. That's why God came to earth in flesh and lived a perfect life and sacrificed himself so that we could have salvation, because it was not something that I could do, and it was not something that you could do, but it was something that we had to have done for us. So throughout the church buildings and throughout the world, we see so many people that have made these false professions. Maybe they've made an emotional decision, or maybe they have just prayed a prayer with a friend in Bible school. But we've not seen them actually live that out. You guys have heard me say this before. A God the size of our God that can hang the stars in the sky with his fingertips can't come into your life and not make a change. You can see God in everyone's life, or you can see the lack of him. So you see, in Matthew 13, Jesus tells this parable about a sower. He goes out, and it's not the sower like we think, like with a needle and thread, but they're sowing seeds at a field. And he sows the seed in different kinds of soil. And different soil takes the seed differently. And what this is a parable about how we spread the gospel and how people accept it. Some hear it and they just brush it off and don't think anything of it. Some people hear it and maybe they think about it, but it doesn't stick. Some people hear it and it gets into them a little bit, but then it just gets washed away at the first sign of conflict or friction. But then there's some that hear that message and it takes root and it changes them. And what Jesus says about this is for those people that it changes them and it takes root, man, it says that they produce fruit and they produce results. This is one of the best ways that we can see in our own lives if the gospel has taken root in our own lives. If it hasn't, there's not going to be much of a change. If it hasn't, there's not going to be much of the change in people around us. But when it has, man, we change. If it's taken root, and I'm not much of a green thumb. I can't grow much, but I think it's amazing to see, the way that things will grow. My father-in-law, Steve, he used to grow tomatoes all the time, and I don't like tomatoes, but I think it's amazing how you can take this little plant that's only like this big, but when you plant it right and you take care of it right and you nurture it, it'll grow into this big plant that will produce this fruit that so many people love. And you can't necessarily see that in the beginning. You just see this little starter. But as you nurture it and as you take care of it, it grows and it develops, and then it produces this fruit on the branches. Well, the Christian life is the same way. For the true born-again believer, what starts out as just a little spark of commitment in their lives, it develops into this this tree. And then that tree begins to develop fruit that you couldn't see originally. But it becomes one of the most obvious things in the world once you start to nurture it and once it starts to grow. So for the believer in our lives, what we do is we see fruit in two ways. We see fruit in ourselves. We grow. Paul said that when you're a baby in Christ, when you're a babe, you want milk. Babies drink milk, and that's it. You can't give a baby a steak on day one. They can't chew it. They can't process it. But eventually, they need more than milk as they grow. They need meat. They need different types of food then. And after a while, man, they need meat, and they will grow and develop that with that meat. So as a believer, when you start off with that spark of commitment and you start off in those small beginnings, you begin to grow and you begin to develop, and you begin to want to know more about God, and you begin to see, to grow as a disciple. But it's not just that. You also see fruit in the fact that you begin to reach out to other people. You know, this past week in Sunday school, we talked about Moses being on the mountain with God and how that he came down and his face shone so brightly that they had to put a veil over his face because it was hard to look at him. Man, when you encounter God, when you're around God, everyone around you can see it. So when we try and pretend that there's no connection, that there's no relationship between us and God, and nobody can see that, nobody can see that we're connected to Him, we need to check up and see kind of where we're at on that. Because the believer that is living their life for God, everybody's going to be able to see. Everybody's going to be able to tell if they're truly living for Him. And when people see that different life, when people see that something is different, something has changed in their lives, when they see kindness, when they see love, humility, meekness, the fruits of the Spirit, when they see things like that, it's so countercultural to what's out there today that people are going to want that. People are going to be attracted to that. And as they begin to accept Him and as they begin to make that commitment themselves, it's going to see them grow. And that's going to be fruit in your life. So we as believers, we see an opportunity to grow, not just ourselves as fruit, but to grow others and to see others accept Jesus as their Savior. And kind of one last thing and one last thought on this. Throughout the Bible, Jesus tells us and Paul tells us that we have to believe in Jesus. And that's part of the confusion is so many people hear that they just have to believe that Jesus is real and they think that that's enough to get into heaven. But you see that word that the Bible uses for believe, it's a word that means faith that drives us to action. So when we try and say that we believe in Him, but it doesn't drive us into action, there's something wrong. James, he tells us in his epistle that he says that faith without works is dead. And what he means there is a faith that is not backed by any works, a faith that doesn't produce any works out of your life or produce any fruit, as we've been talking about, out of your life. That's not a saving faith. Just knowing that Jesus exists isn't enough. The demons literally have spoken to Jesus. The devil has spoken to Jesus, and they're not saved. It takes commitment to Him, giving your life to Him to be saved. But it's all about committing yourself. It's not about works. It's not about the things that you do. You cannot earn your way there. But it's about making a true 100% commitment to Him. And because you're so thankful of what He's done for you, because you're so thankful for what He's done for you by producing salvation, by producing a saving act in your life, that's going to push you into works. That's going to push you to do good things. Trees, certain trees, they automatically produce fruit. They don't have to be told to grow a tomato. They just do it. That's what they do. Christians produce fruit. They don't have to be told what to do. They don't have to be told they have to do it. They just do it because that's what Christians do. So if you have maybe prayed a prayer in your life and there was no change, or you have never actually committed your life to Him, or maybe you're sitting there watching this and you've never actually made that commitment to Him, and you know that you're lost. You know that if you were to close your eyes right now for the last time, that you would not be in heaven. Man, I beg you, I'm praying for you that you would accept Him. You would commit your life to Him, and you would live your life for Him. Life for Him is so much better than anything else. So as you're watching this, pause this, stop it, and pray, and just ask Him to save you. And if you do that, man, would you let us know that you've done that? Would you message me? Would you message the page and let us know that you've made that commitment today? And maybe you have made that commitment, but you realize that your life doesn't look like what it should. And that you need to come back to Him before your seed gets blown away out of the dirt. Man, would you make that commitment to rededicate yourself to Him? And if you make any type of decision, man, message us and let us know. We want to hear, we want to know, and we want to help you and walk through this with you. We love you guys, and we're here for you.